Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa, the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, who's finally back in the States. Hopefully him and his wife and whoever else went. I don't know if they went, just the two of them or who else had a good time overseas. But today we are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the OG, the guy that helped me get started in this space over at Detroit Bad Boys, Laz Jackson. Laz, what is up, my guy?
I'm doing great. Thanks you both for having me. It's definitely the dog days of the offseason. So I know we got stuff to talk about, but I'm also excited to see in which direction this podcast gets taken off the rails.
It's going to happen, right? Like, that's the best part of having you on. Me and Omari, like, we're just going to, somewhere it's going to go crazy, Omari.
Yeah, kind of like how USA hit the KD button today. We just hit the last button. We were like, we just need a spark. You know, it's the dog days. Nothing's going. We're down 10-7. No, we weren't down 10-7, but yeah. Beyond that.
All right. So first, before we get into any Pistons content, we may talk some Olympics at some point as well if we have time. I got to get your thoughts on lawn care because I'm like swimming over here, Laz. Omari has no understanding of this. He's cooking.
I have a little bit of an understanding.
Like yesterday, you said I mulch. You thought I mulch. I'm like, I would never mulch. That's disgraceful to somebody.
Why is that? Why is that disgraceful?
Huh?
What's wrong with mulching?
Because then you leave it laying on the grass, and
isn't that good for the grass though?
I don't know. It might.
Wait, mulching the lawn or like mulching?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Mulch the lawn when you cut it.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I just got to get your thoughts because Omari thinks I spend too much time, that I'm trying to be like an egotistical, like force everybody else to feel bad about themselves on the block, and that's not my motivation. So I got to get your thoughts on this, Laz.
So from what I've observed, like the people who care really about their lawn, like they do it for them, right? Like they don't necessarily do it to appease other people, or if like your HOA like mandates it or whatever. But Bryce, like you don't got an HOA, right?
No.
This is coming from within. This is self-motivated. Okay. My personal thing, I did lawn care growing up. It was just me, my mom, and my sister, and so like as the like quote unquote man of the house, like I had to do all the lawn care. And so when I like start making enough money, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Mm-hmm. Someone is doing this for me, and so I haven't done lawn care in like 5-6 years. But my lawn looks nice, so like that's my take. Like if you wanted to if you want it nice, get somebody to do it for you because I'm not into that.
I respect it. Like I can live with that one. That's not an anti-lawn care argument, Omari. That's just an he doesn't want to do it. Where do you actually?
Lawn care. I am. I'm anti-lawn care in general for sure.
Okay.
Omari wants like native plants and stuff in his front yard.
Yeah, I want like a fruit tree in like my front yard. Well, no, I want it in the backyard because people would steal the fruit if it was in the front yard.
No, Omari wants like the rocks, right?
That's
like
selfish. You won't plant your fruit tree in the front yard because you don't want to let other people have it.
Well, it's just certain types.
There's no way that fruit tree would Bryce, feed the entire block. It would go beyond you. Feed
Bryce,
the world.
I live in a different community. I don't want people on my front lawn. I want people.
I don't want a tree near my house because then I got roots threatening my foundation. Like that's no bueno.
No, that's what like I'm anti-tree for a couple. The wind blows out here, guys, and I don't need a tree falling on my house or my car or anything like that.
Or something.
Yeah. And then also that's why everybody gives me credit for the trampoline in the ground and the safety to the kids. My number one motivation is I don't need my trampoline blowing over into the neighbor's yard, ripping down their power lines, which happened to the guy across the street. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, like our really good friends that live across the street, over their fence into the next door neighbor's yard, rip down their power lines. And of course, the power line, once it's to the pole to your house, guess who pays for that? You do. So they paid for all of that to get fixed back up. So, and then
is that just like a regular gust of wind, or was that like a
no, like storm? It's when storms come, like if it's just regular wind, usually it's not that crazy, but like a storm comes through, the straight line winds off the storms are way more prevalent than like a tornado actually hitting. I mean, that obviously happens, but yeah, we have some pretty crazy wind, but like also I don't like mowing leaves.
you got like tornado damage, right? You're
Yeah,
insured for that.
sure. Yeah.
Like some random wind, Geico is like, hell no, we're not paying.
Yeah. So it's and we just don't have a lot of protection where we live either. There's not a whole lot of it's not buildings and all around to protect it. So all right, like I'm cool with Laz's answer. I respect it. I get it. Omari will continue to work on it.
Okay. But I've learned a lot. Like I've always seen mulching as like killing two birds with one stone because you fertilize the grass, but then you also don't have to bag it and do all the other stuff, right? But like
only pile though, like that's not actually mulching.
The key to
distribute it evenly. That's more work. Like
the key to mulching is you have to mow more frequently, in my opinion, because if you let it get too tall and thick, you go to mulch it and then it just leaves it laying on top of it's just. I'm not about that. I will say Randy got real jealous yesterday that nobody was commenting on her flowers and all of that. So she's about to get in on this on Twitter. She's growing she's got lettuce and watermelon and carrots and all of that stuff on top of her flowers and everything else. So we do that stuff as well, Omari. We don't kill the bees in the front as they're pollinating and cross-pollinating between the flowers. Like we're environmentalists in that way. So give us a little bit of credit there.
Okay. No, I'm happy to see that. The flowers were I agree. We were giving all the grass all the credit, but the flowers definitely set the scene as well. It's like a team effort. Like that's a team effort line. Like I see the collective vision there, which is also pretty heartwarming and inspiring. And you have the trampoline in the back. Like you guys just have like like
little slice of Americana.
A little slice of Americana. Exactly.
All right, let's talk about Pistons. Laz, this is where it could go up. We could literally do this all episode long. We could just talk, something would come up. All right, let's start with JB. We're not going to go in chronological order this time. I know that's in general, I like to do that, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on all of these things, but now that you have the big picture for the most part, right? I think this roster is mostly rounded into shape. You mentioned, we have the one roster spot. They have the one roster spot. What are your thoughts? What were your thoughts on JB? And specifically now that you've seen this roster, your thoughts on JB and how he can handle and fit with the roster that Trajan has put out there?
Yeah, I think JB was a good decision. As a team who's like struggled to establish a baseline of competency, JB is a guy who's proven he can get teams like to that competent level and like elevated slightly above it. The thing you keep hearing is that like he has a hard ceiling or whatever. Like they didn't get out of the first round last year, had to claw and fight to beat Orlando this year, and then got like promptly beat pretty badly by the eventual champion Celtics. And so it's like, oh, he doesn't really win in the playoffs. It's like, that's not the concern for Detroit right now. The concern for Detroit is like not becoming a national story by like setting an NBA record losing streak, right? Like let's win some games first. Let's establish a way that we play in an identity before we start worrying about how many wins and losses. And I think JB over his stops in Houston and Memphis and Cleveland has shown that he's able to establish a defensive identity. Omari, you covered JB when he was in Memphis, right? Like you had that one overlap season. And I remember you were on the pod talking about how like that was a transition season for that Memphis team, right? Like they traded Conley at the deadline, I think. Like Gasol was gone before the season. But like you still had like young dudes like fighting and like playing hard and playing well. And to me, that's a big sign of coaching when like that's something we really didn't see last year is this team like continuing to fight through adversity. They just like faced a ton of adversity, right? And we still had open questions at the end of the season about like how they would make their way through that this season. And now I think we have a better idea of like this team will be able to have an identity defensively and persevere and like win some more games than under Monty Williams.
When you look at what JB did with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and like not necessarily just the scheme as much, but just handling those two types of guys, does that? But also you look at Evan Mobley, you look at Jaren, so you've also had bigs who hopefully some of that experience can rub off of Duren as well. Just seeing the players he's worked with, does that kind of add to it as well? Not just seeing what he's done at previous stops, but that some of the players he's worked with also have some overlap with what he's going to have here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it gives you a framework, right? Yeah. Especially for Cleveland in the Donovan Mitchell and Garland and Ivy and Cade. I'm a little. That's my like lone outstanding question for this team though, because right now, if you look at the roster, it really does seem like they're setting Ivy up to be the backup point guard, and that would be. I mean, like honestly, like the number 5 overall pick, like if he's a good backup point guard, that's like not a terrible option. But I think that would be disappointing, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But if it's in the service of setting him up to be a high level player and still succeed like inside of that context, I think it's a good thing for him. And I think it's a good thing for the team. It's also
especially with the extension in the year, well, eligibility in the year.
Yeah. It's like, if we're going to pay you, we need to know like what kind of guy you're going to be. And if you're better in this role, or if you're better with the ball in your hands and you're better like in when things are more geared towards you, then like, let's put you in that to see how effective you are at that, so that we know how much to pay you, or, you know, whether or not we want to pay you at all, which is still an open question.
Let's stay on the offensive end, because I feel like that's probably where fans have the biggest questions, right? Like I feel like when JB first got hired, the defense kind of speaks for itself, I think. And I'm curious to see your thoughts there also. But I think people's biggest worry was lots of 2 big lineups in his previous 2 spots. That probably had to do with the roster. And I don't think that there's a roster that absolutely forces that. I don't know, with Isaiah Stewart, Paul Reed, maybe we'll see some in the second unit. But just overall offensively, are you worried about a lack of creativity? Because I feel like I've heard that spoken with JB, and this roster specifically kind of needing that. Do you not think they need that? You know, where are your thoughts on that? It doesn't even have to be specifically to JB, but just in general, where they need to go offensively, scheme wise.
So the Chase Down podcast is like my like guiding star for like all things Cleveland. And they talked a lot about how JB did a good job coaching around the limitations shooting wise of Isaac Okoro, who like had a good percentage from 3 this season, but teams did not treat like a shooter. And they had some good examples of offensive sets and stuff that they had run this past season that took advantage of the fact that like teams weren't really defending Okoro. Like I think that's something that it's very easy to see a world in which like Asar is kind of like implanted into that role, and Asar is a better passer than Okoro, and so there are things that can be like coached around. But I will say that like 2 years ago, like yes, they were very stagnant offensively, but it was a lot of like we are doing what works, right? Like Donovan Mitchell high pick and roll works, so we're going to keep doing it. Darius Garland high pick and roll works, so we're going to keep doing it. And so it's like, if it's a case of I need to adjust to like when it stops working, like I'm fine with that, because I think the Pistons is like at that point, like you are starting from a place of we found something that works, right? Which as much as some of the like Monty did some creative stuff last year, but they never really found a like solid offensive identity, I think. And so it's like, again, just as long as you start from a place of something that works, I think you'll be in good shape. Yeah.
Well, I thought Monty ran good sets and actions like after timeout at times, but it seemed like the scheme and flow, like we were sold. I don't know if we were sold. We all assumed this 0.5 offense is coming. And I felt like we never really saw that. And to, just back up your point, I was looking at the Cavs team stats. They were 30th in pace and 17th in 3-point attempt rate 2 years ago. And then this most recent season, they jumped to 22nd in pace and 7th in 3-point attempt rate. So it seemed like, JB was able to push that forward. I don't know, Omari, you may have some better understanding of maybe who kind of seems like JB is a defensive guy, or, I know we just got some more assistant coach news. Is there any kind of understanding? Like, is Luke the offensive guy coming with him from Cleveland, or anybody else on? I know Fred's more of the shooting coach, not necessarily the offense as a whole. Do you have any perspective on that of what assistant may kind of be the OC, quote unquote?
Yeah, I think the coaching staff is still coming into shape, so some of that's going to be seen. I think if you look at reputations, Luke Walton's had that reputation on the offensive end, obviously coming out of Golden State, so you can sort of speculate based off of that. But I'd expect his staff will be finalized, probably pretty soon here. So I think we'll have more clarity on that pretty shortly. But I am curious, because when the JB news first came out, it seems like some fans were split. Like I know that there is reporting on Sean Sweeney and like up and coming guys, and ended up going with a coach who had already like they say retread or whatnot. Did you have any opinion on that or any like preference going into the process? And then after they hired JB, did any feelings change or was it pretty consistent?
So when we got the reporting that was like, if you're doing a first-time front office like leader, you also don't want to do a first-time head coach. Like that is something that makes sense to me. I think this process, I do wonder how the process would have been different if like at the beginning of the offseason, Troy Weaver and Monty Williams had like both been fired and they would have had more time to do a coaching search in addition to the front office search. It seems like everything's like we haven't really seen them play any games, and so we're still kind of in like a speculative and a little bit of a honeymoon phase with JB. But I do wonder like how things would be different. On the other hand, like you look at some of the names that were hired this season, like the Pistons weren't getting Mike Budenholzer. Like JJ Redick was not leaving the podcast studio to come coach the Detroit Pistons, most likely. Kenny Atkinson, like Cleveland is a better job right now than Detroit. I think Kenny Atkinson was a guy like I always thought did a really good job of getting the most out of teams that like did not have those Brooklyn teams like weren't overly talented, but they definitely like made the most of what they had, and I always admired Kenny for that. And I thought that might be a good fit for the Pistons. So to have that like not fall into place was like, okay, like that's fine. And then if it was like between James Borrego and Sean Sweeney and JB Bickerstaff, like I'm fine with JB. I had heard like I would also have been fine with Borrego. I also would have been fine with Sweeney, but I just think the Pistons really needed a new direction in terms of coaching. And as long as the person wasn't like woefully underqualified, like I think it should have been worked out fine.
We'll get to the players here in just a second. I want to ask one more question because really JB's rep comes on the defensive end. And this team was like, as much as we talk about lack of floor spacing and turnovers and all of that, this team was pretty bad defensively. Now, again, we're going to talk personnel in a second, and a lot of that has to do with personnel, but what are kind of your expectations? I'm not going to ask you to be an expert on JB Bickerstaff and the defensive scheme and all of that. But what are your expectations defensively in terms of he did help his teams improve? So do you think he can get something out of Jalen Duren that we've all wanted, Cade, J.I., etc.? Like, do you expect to see a jump on that end?
I expect to see like a small jump, right? Okay. I will be right now, like if you look at the roster, if I think about the guys who I think are going to play, like none of them are really standout defensive players, and so I do kind of worry about that. But at the same time, like with vets, like you don't have to worry about vets, like you don't have to worry as much about vets like not executing the scheme or like being out of position. And so I think once you kind of again like you build that baseline of execution, then you can kind of build on top of that and let the kids like figure out exactly like what they need to be doing and like how they can freelance. Like I think that will be beneficial. But in terms of like base defense, like I think like the roster still says like we're probably a drop team. Like I don't want Duren switching everything, and I don't think we're going to be playing like Stu and Duren in the front court together to start. Like maybe you switch with Stu as the main bench big. But I do think that like of paramount importance will be like fighting through screens, getting over screens, team rebounding, and ball pressure. Like I think those will be things that this team is set up to do pretty well.
Okay, so let me ask real quick. We fell into this one last time. Who do you think is the best guard? So we're taking Asar, Ron, those guys out. Who's the best guard defender on this team? So you're looking at what? Cade, J.I., THJ, Beasley, and Marcus Sasser.
Yeah. So
I guess Dennis Jenkins, right? Like I can't throw like we can't exclude him. He's on a two-way.
Yeah. You guys did this, and I was like in the car, and I was like scrunching my face up, like, "Ooh, this is not a question I really want to be." So like, yeah, I think it might be Cade by default. We saw Cade have some really effective moments last season. In particular, thinking about a game against Atlanta in which he was like really effective against DeJounte Murray. but that is very much like by default. We all are very familiar with Jaden Ivey's defensive struggles through the first 2 years of his career. Marcus Sasser's just like a little bit too small. Sure. And Beasley, I think, acquitted himself well as a defensive player, like for the Bucks last season, better than he has in the past. But on the other hand, like it's easy to be better when you have Giannis and Brook kind of like lurking behind you, and the Pistons don't got that. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to a short break, Omari. Whenever we come back, you can start off with whoever you want. If you want to start with the draft picks, you want to start with the free agents, you do that. And we'll start talking about the players actually on this roster after this short break.
All right, we are back with segment 2. And before we lead off, I'm going to say I forgot to shout out Kyle. It's actually funny. I was at the mall yesterday, and I'm like pulling out of my spot to leave, and there's like a car like waiting behind me to like take my spot after I pull out. And as I'm about to pull out, like they kind of hunk a couple times to like get my attention, and I look back like, is this somebody I know? And I back up a little bit. And he's like, Omari. And I'm like, what's up? And he was like, yo, I'm a fan of the pod. And we're like talking for a minute. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to shout you out. So shout out to Kyle, fan of the pod. Again, like, even if I'm about to pull off at the mall, if you see me or wherever you see Bryce, like, chase us down. Like, we'll definitely shout you out. And we love that real life interaction. I know Bryce was like a mini celebrity at Summer League the other week. So.
Yeah, no, it really is the coolest part, right? Whenever you're just, especially at Summer League, you're just standing there and all of a sudden somebody recognizes you. Obviously with YouTube, this has changed. People actually know what we look like, but hopefully I'll make it out to Detroit this year. We can either do a live or at least be able to come out to a game and see everybody. So yes, that's anytime you guys see us do that. Also, we want to help support the pod. Like, subscribe, rate, review. You guys know the drill. Help us get those numbers up. We appreciate it. But who you got first for Laz, Omari? Who we want to dive into?
Yeah, let's just start off with the rookies. Ron Holland. I think we all agree that he got better as Summer League went on. But just initial Ron Holland opinion after the draft, and then how did that evolve after seeing him in Vegas?
Yeah, you guys know I was a big fan of Ron Holland pre-draft. I wanted to run something by you though, Omari and Bryce. Mm-hmm. So we saw Holland be again like very productive in terms of like points and rebounds, but also very inefficient in terms of like just shooting percentages. And we also saw him make some like very like head scratching shot choices. But we also saw like as a part of that, he also had a very, very low turnover rate. I think he only had like 3 turnovers the entire Summer League or something like that.
It was 1 per game. So what, 4 in 4 games.
Yeah. So Bryce, like when you're going through that, are you like, okay, like he only had 4 turnovers, but he had 12 bad shots. Like, do I count that as like half a turnover? Like what?
Yeah.
How does that? And like, if we can cut down again, because that's bad decision making. And so if you can cut down on some of that, it's like maybe we up some turnovers, but we gain some efficiency. Like what's the balance there in your mind for Holland?
Yeah, I think I put it in my notes and on one of my breakdowns from the Substack was like some of the field goal percentage, I think, is just decision making. He has to learn that when he gets into the lane, he's not just gonna be able to score over it. You meet Victor at the rim, you should probably pass the ball. Like it's probably the better decision than trying to put him in on a poster that's not going to work. Or I even like some of his touch on some of his shots, but it's just like, if you're not on balance, if you've drawn 3 guys to the lane, I think that was probably my biggest thing coming out of Summer League was the field goal percentage at the rim. I'm still kind of bullish that he's going to shoot it. I don't think the jumper is just broke mechanically. I think it's going to get there. And so it's like, he can get to the rim, right? Off the ball, zoom actions, transition, whatever. He's got to be able to make the right decisions when he gets there, whether it's to finish, how he finishes, whatever it is, Laz. So yeah, I think the low turnovers were awesome. But the decision-making plays into the field goal percentage.
Yeah. I liked Holland more the less he had to dribble. And so, that's a young guy thing in general. But I think if you want him to be effective faster, like you're going to have to do more like stampede handoff stuff. You're gonna have to like run him off some off ball cuts. You're gonna have to like trying to open up stuff for him without shooting gravity. So like it might be tough, but like if you can get him a like runway and you can get a big like out of the paint, like he has a great chance of like initiating a good shot or getting fouled. I do think he got fouled a little bit. He should have got more calls.
He should have got
5 free throw attempts again. Can I ask you guys okay, so this is
Sure.
I want to ask you a question, both, and Omari, I do want your thought also, so I won't interrupt once I ask. I think we all probably agree that he's, I don't know, he's coming off but like his role is going to be this off the bench, what we're outlining, right? Off the ball cuts, transition, those type of things. Is there value then, Laz, and then Omari, in playing him G League minutes, all alternating somehow to where he can play this other role of like on ball, the man, primary option, whatever? Because I don't know that he's going to get to play that role even in the second unit, especially if JI is running the second unit. So I'm not saying send Ron Holland to the G League. I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering, would you see some value in that, or does he need to get those reps right now early in his career?
Occasionally. Okay. And maybe like just to start the year.
Okay.
To stay like kind of stay ready. I think especially as the season winds down and the Pistons have less to play for, it's very useful to have like this to experiment in the NBA lab and like trying to figure some stuff out as an on-ball guy. But yeah, as I've been putting together like what I think what the rotation is going to look like, I've been saying like I don't think Ron is going to be ready to play right away for this team, and I don't think the Pistons should like hope he's ready to play right away. And so if he's not going to factor into the 10-man, 9-man rotation, like, yeah, sure, it makes sense to send him down to the G League. And if he's in the G League, he absolutely should be working on the things he's not good at, because he averaged 20 a game in the G League last season, like doing a lot of the stuff he wasn't good at. So you want him to develop, and you want him, but you also like want him to build better habits than the ones he currently has. And so it's a factor of like decision making instead of just like go shoot 8 threes a game to show that you can like do this. But I'm curious to hear what Omari has to say.
Yeah, Omari, like 10 games of being the guy. Is that something that would interest you?
Yeah, I think the thing with Ron, well, one, it's just really tough to see minutes for the Pistons, obviously, like barring any injuries, but it's the first time really in the last 5 years that they've had an opportunity to just say right off the bat, like, hey, we want you to play for the Motor City Cruise. This is going to be your role. You could have a very, specific plan for him. You can compare what he did with the Ignite and then get him onto a Cruise team that's going to have better point guard play. He's going to have Dennis Jenkins. He's going to have some guys that can actually move the rock. And, you could, and that's pretty good data, right? Because you have a guy who's a year older, playing against a lot of the same people, but in a more structured environment. And to me, that's why you invest in the Motor City Cruise. It's not just to get the second round pick some run, or, in the past, we've seen some of the first round guys get reps down there just to get reacclimated. But then the Hawks have had a lot of success just throwing whoever, into their G League system. And they've had a lot of success with that, right? I think Amin Thompson played some G League games with Houston last year. So like that's what I would want to see if Ron Holland does get assigned. Like, just a very specific plan to get him comfortable, see if he can spread his wings a little bit, get him more catch and shoot threes instead of, like last mentioned, some of the bad shots he had to take last year. And then if the opportunities come in the NBA for whatever, and then of course you call him up and, you can, I'm sure he'll benefit not having to take the shots he took in Summer League if you're only running them in cuts and, in transition and whatnot. But yeah, I think pretty much from the start, like if you have the Motor City Cruise, it seems like a great opportunity to really use that and get Ron Holland up to speed quicker.
Well, do you think that's his ceiling? I guess is my point here, Laz. Yeah. Like, is his ceiling potentially like the second option next to K that can take on-ball reps at times and do that? Because if it's always just off-ball cutter, just come off zoom actions, get out in transition, offensive rebound, be the second best defender on the team behind Asar, then maybe it's not worth this. But I think if you see that higher ceiling, which I honestly do, I mean, I said that from the beginning with Ron Holland before he was ever a Piston, is I think that ceiling's there. I just don't know the percentage chance outcome. But Omari said if there's a specific plan of, hey, let's take 10 or 15 games throughout the season and let's go make him the primary guy. And so he can still get those reps. But if you don't see that ceiling, Laz, then I don't know that it's worth it. Like, hey, just settle into your role. Do you see that potential outcome as a ceiling for him? Jaylen Brown, let's just throw out the name, right? Everybody uses it. Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown. Yeah. I absolutely see that as a possibility, as like a high-end outcome for Holland. You look at some of the fluidity off the dribble he already has. He had like one really nice mid-range pull-up in the first game. Was that Philly? Yeah, I think so. He had like a couple really nice like left-hand DHOs, left-hand finishes. It's like that. Like you can see the vision. It's just like interspersed in between. Like I'm going to put my head down and drive into 3 guys now, right? And so he's 19, and so you want to be able to facilitate an environment in which like he can reach that outcome. And for now, like in his rookie year, the G League is a better spot for him to do that. Yeah.
Especially if the Pistons actually want to win some games, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other component here is if you want Jaden Ivey to get some of that freedom with the second unit, you can't also have, like, I don't know that they both can play that role even in the second unit. So Omari, any other thoughts on Ron, or do we want to go ahead and go to Bobby? Or
yeah, we can talk about Bobby Clippman.
Bobby, and then we'll get to the free agency. So
yeah, because he's a guy that came in, and like most second round picks, like you only know so much about them, especially a guy like him that played in Australia. But sort of the same framing with Ron. What was your perception of Clippman coming into summer league, and then how did that evolve once we actually got to see what he could do? I mean, especially with the passing aspect, of course.
Yeah. I had zero frame of reference for Bobby before he was drafted by the Pistons. But I like the frame. Obviously, the passing is like a nice plus, but the shooting ability, to me, was like the big standout. I can't remember the Pistons, like Bojan, right? It was like the last time the Pistons had like a 6'7", 6'8" guy who could like really shoot like that. And we saw how what a difference that made for the offense, like when he was able to play and when he wasn't. The thing I'll say though is like Bobby's very much not Bojan, because he shot like, what was it, like
it wasn't
9, it was like 9 for 28 inside the arc or something like that. It was just like you see he cannot finish inside the paint at all, and it's a strength thing, it's a technique thing. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But like as we talk about the G League, as we talk about development areas, like having a guy like that in your G League system who spaces the floor and opens things up for Ron Holland, like I think is very valuable. And it's also an opportunity for him to work on that aspect of his game, right? Like the shooting and the passing will like immediately make him a contributor at the G League level. And I think that like that's good, right? I never have high expectations for like second round guys. Like the fact of the matter is like most of them don't work out. And so if you get a guy in there and he facilitates things for the G League team and like makes Ron's life easier for the months of November and December, like I'm cool with that.
I mean, we've kind of gotten burned on these second round guys recently, right? We get excited about the Isaiah Livers, and then there was a Luka Garza, for a little bit. And it's
I was gonna say, why are you dumping cold water on the Clippman hype train? Like he's
who?
Pistons? No, last. Like,
last. I was just saying, don't call me
last.
out.
I'll say last.
Okay.
But only because like Pistons fans get so excited, and they've always gotten so excited for the second round guys. Like I'm not even talking about modern fans. I'm talking going all the way back to like when I was in middle school, like the second round guys would get so much hype coming in. I'll do another fan base. I guess more excited for guys after 30 than the Pistons do. Like somebody just mentioned, what was his name? The really quick dude that came out like 5-6 years ago. He was a guard. He came out of Tennessee. Jordan Bone. I saw a random Jordan Bone mention on Twitter a few days ago. I was like, why are we talking about Jordan Bone?
Saban Lee was at one point a member of the core four. Hey, here's what I'll say. Peak second round Pistons draft picks was in the mid 2010s whenever they took Chris Middleton. You had Spencer Dinwiddie.
Jonas Jerebko had a great rookie season.
Bruce Brown also. I went on the Athletic NBA show, and one of the trivia questions I knew was going to come because Brown and
Kyrie Thomas
and Middleton were NBA champions that were Pistons second round picks that won championships on other teams, and that was sorry. Now I'm just bringing up bad vibes. That's messed up. That's my fault. Like this went off the rails.
That's what I deserve for dumping water on the Bobby hype train.
No, I think listen, he was good at Summer League, and part of it was he made shots, he made threes, and part of the thing with Bobby is he hasn't always done that consistently. He had a great stretch at the end of his freshman season at Wake Forest where he shot really well. But in 26 games, 3.5 attempts, he shot 34% in the NBL this year. So it comes and goes. I think he's an awesome second round pick. I thought that was as a second round pick, I thought it was awesome. And specifically for this team, Laz, because what I like, and you kind of alluded to it with Boyan, is it's this true, I see him as like a true 4-man. So eventually maybe there's low man rim protection and the rebounding and then the passing and the skill level from there. So it's absolutely a second round pick that you should be taking. I just don't think it's this year. And I mean, again, they just paid Tobias Harris $26 million to play 30 plus minutes at the 4 for 70 plus games. There's not a whole lot of minutes left at the 4, even if Bobby was ready. And I think we're going to see Asar at the 4 some. Tech would be cool in some smaller lineups. Stu and some bigger lineups, like 10 or 15%, not a lot. But I think he's interesting. I want to finish off with Summer League and these guys. And then last segment, we can go into the free agents. Dennis Jenkins, Tolu Smith, thoughts on Marcus Sasser's Summer League? Like, hit them all.
Sasser had a rough Summer League, obviously. I think it's just pretty clear at this point that he's not a point guard. Yeah. And as such, like having him have to be an undersized shooting guard, it's like maybe that works with like a Jaden Ivey, Marcus Sasser lineup. But even then, I think there are better ways to accentuate like what makes Jaden Ivey great than putting Marcus Sasser next to him. And so that's looking a little suspect, especially when you recall that it cost the Pistons like 2 second-round picks to
trade up for it.
Yeah, it's like that's kind of rough. Jenkins seemed like what's the like a quadruple A NBA point guard. Like, you have triple A and you have the big leagues. It's like he's like right in between that level. So it's like I hope like having a guy who organizes and sets things up at the G League level to help those guys out and help the other guys out in their development, and I think is wonderful. We saw with the Ignite last year, not having that guy can be deleterious to guys' offensive development. So I'm excited about that. Tolu Smith, like, man, I didn't know what to make of Tolu. Like, he was a great, like, good frame. Did like 1 or 2 things a game. You're like, oh wow. And then like he would just do some like head scratching stuff. It's like, does this guy like know like he's playing? Like, what is going on? So as a guy who needs to learn how to think the game a little bit better, I think that's a perfectly fine like G League swing, especially when you remember that like if you are like that tall and can think the game, like you are in the NBA. The NBA like needs centers and backup centers who can play. And so like if you get a guy like that in your system and get him to figure out how to play NBA basketball, like that's a perfectly fine swing.
That's a cruise center, right? Like you would be perfectly like, that's not a 2-way guy, but that's a cruise center.
Yeah.
Real quick before we go to break, guys, if you're listening right now on YouTube, this is my bad. I forgot to text our guy. Somebody has to go change a setting on the YouTube to let enable the chat. And so if you're watching on YouTube, thank you guys so much for tuning in, but the chat is disabled and I'll take ownership. We're like 150 episodes in. I think this is the first time we've really screwed this up, but I'm supposed to text somebody at the Free Press, let them know that it's been created. They have to go change a setting. They don't trust me and Omari and Wes, I guess, to change the Free Press YouTube settings. We don't have access to that. So I'm very, very sorry. We love your guys' engagement with those comments. And so like, I think Omari and I both were sitting here going like, man, the chat is not interested in the episode today.
I was like, it's Olympics. People are distracted. It's almost August. Like, I get it.
Yeah. No, that's what I was like, dang, man, they are like, do not like the content. Usually Laz has them popping off, but so my bad. I apologize. We will get it right the next time. But right now, we're going to go to short break. Omari, when we come back, let's get into the free agents, trade, all of these veteran acquisitions and what Laz thinks about those.
All right, we are back with segment 3. Laz, let's start with just an overall offseason recap based on what you wanted the Pistons to accomplish this offseason. And looking at the roster now, how satisfied are you with where things are?
Love it.
That's a good question. So I was much more concerned with changes in leadership than I was with like changes in the roster. Okay. And so like from an offseason perspective, like, they got rid of the GM and the coach. And like, that's what I thought was necessary. It's like, that's a big win right there. Tobias Harris at that price you see a lot of like national guys being like, why'd the Pistons give him $26 million? And it's like, who else was going to get that money to play in Detroit?
Yeah.
Like nobody. So, and like Bryce said earlier, he's going to play 70 games. He's going to give them 30 minutes a game at a position that they like really need when you look at the other guys on their roster. And so like, I think that was a big win. So getting Fontecchio in for like less than $10 million a year was like was fantastic in my mind.
Third year kind of hurt though, right?
Yeah. But he'll be like, he wants to get back on the market.
I was gonna say that's a Tech thing. I don't know that that's like Trajan mishandling negotiations. Yeah. That's like I could see Tech like standing firm. The Tech contract made me like the overpay for Tobias was kind of balanced by he didn't even come close. He underpaid Fontecchio as far as I'm concerned. So sorry, go ahead.
And and in 2 years, like my thing is like in 2 years, the extensions for Ivy/Duren will also be on your books, and so you're gonna want space, right? Sure. That's why I'm fine with like the balloon payment on Tobias Harris as well. The Hardaway Jr. trade was like a little bit eyebrow raising, but you look at what other salary dumps like cost, and is like it's fine. Quentin Grimes would have been nice to keep, but if he like didn't really want to be here and like didn't factor into the team's long-term plans, wasn't going to get an extension here, like sure, that's fine, and that makes sense. Beasley for 1 year as like hey, we're going to trade you to a nice team at the deadline. Thanks for giving us 8 attempts a game at 40% for 50 games. Like I totally fine with that. Like okay with that, especially and like a good bit of business by him when you look at what Tyus Jones got. Is like to
Gary Trent Jr. Like Gary, I mean, the argument is Gary Trent Jr. gets to play on the Bucks, not the Pistons, but he's also playing for what $4 million less or something, right?
Yeah. Market's tough for role players shorter than 6'4" or 6'4" and under. Like if you're not Derek White level, like it's just man.
None of the shooters got paid. Buddy Hield didn't get paid either.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So like, I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. So now we're in a place where they still don't have, unless Ivy is like, it's the plan that Ivy is the backup point guard. And I think a very heavy like minute stagger is in place. And I think the roster right now is shaping up to be like one of Caden Ivy is always on the floor. Mm-hmm. One of Tech and Harris, one of Tech and Tobias is always on the floor. And then like one of the bigs. And then like you kind of like mix and match kind of around that. And it's like those two spots are covered. But they still don't have your classic rim protecting center. Like I like Paul Reed. The more I watch Paul Reed when like they acquired him, I was like, this guy like does a lot of stuff at a very he's a very high level doer of stuff. But I'm curious to see if they do experiment with some Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart lineups. I don't know if those lineups would work, but I think like a lot of stuff would happen if you put those two guys.
Don't you have more of an appetite for that than an Isaiah Stewart, James Wiseman second unit front court? And this isn't throwing shade at Wiseman. It's just archetype of player and kind of what they potentially could do. Like I have a little more of an appetite for Stu and Paul Reed than I would Stu and a completely non-floor spacing. I don't want to like Wiseman wasn't unskilled. I just have more of an appetite for that. Yeah. I could see that at times.
Yeah, and you can Reed found ways to make himself useful in like high leverage situations for a really good team as well. It's like that's a guy you want around. That's a guy you want doing stuff. And so like those are my like really big outstanding questions. Is like if Jalen Duren doesn't take a step, not like a leap, but like a step in the right direction defensively, like there is going to be like a lot of questions about how this team is going to perform in terms of like rim protection and shot blocking, which is going to be tough.
I don't think I have a whole lot of faith defensively. This thing gets a whole lot better just based on personnel. I would like to see a little bit of an uptick. What do you think offensively? Like, do you think JB can consistently have lineups on the floor that space the floor, work together, has enough blend of don't you feel that? Did you feel that way last year? I'm not trying to protect Monty. I do not want to turn this into, I feel like the roster is better suited to have a competent offensive groups of 5 than last year's roster did at this time. Am I crazy for feeling that way?
No. Again, like if one of Tobias and Fontecchio is like always on the floor, you always have like a floor spacer at the wing position between Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. You should always have like a plus like defense has to pay attention to this guy's shooter on the floor. Between Cade and Ivy, you always have like a primary ball handler type on the floor. And like from there, it's like, okay, you throw in some Asar, you throw some Stu, you throw some Paul Reed, you throw in some Duren. Like you're not going to win 50 games, but like from like that's a good baseline to like make stuff work and like figure it out from there. So like,
and if
yeah,
you put a Sar, you could. If you put a Sar, you can put Stu, right? Like you can balance a Sar's non-shooting with a little bit of shooting at the big position. Or if you put Duren, then you can balance that with maybe Harris and Tech on the floor at the same time to balance that stuff, especially if Ivy's on the ball. His lack of floor spacing is a little bit less of a concern. So Omari, I know you want to get in here, but I didn't want to feel crazy just going like, I feel better about where this roster is offensively, how it makes sense, putting guys in the right positions.
You look at Isaiah Stewart, and I mean, I know we're talking free agents and he's not, but given that he's the one big that can defend or proven, but also, can shoot and could balance out some of these lineups, especially if you're playing a Sar or Ron Holland. What do you envision for him next season? It seems like he's in this weird spot where he's like the de facto backup big, but also because of his skill set, it seems like he could end up being a guy that's tough to take off the floor as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Stu is very valuable. I think as James is fond of saying, James Edwards III at The Athletic is fond of saying, like, there's a reason why good teams like continue to try and call the Pistons about Isaiah Stewart. But I do think he is kind of, because of the potential of Jalen Duren, Stu is kind of pigeonholed into this backup big role. And like he's already gotten paid, so like I think he's probably perfectly fine with that. But he is the only person, or he is the only like true 5-man on the roster that spaces the floor, unless you believe in Paul Reed shooting, which like maybe that's a maybe.
It was low volume, but he hit a few.
Like
he hit a couple. But the thing with Stu is that like teams have to treat him like a shooter, which they still really didn't do last season. And if he keeps making them pay, then that's a good thing. Like if he is able to up the volume like a little tiny bit, like I don't want Stu taking 6 threes a game, but like if teams aren't going to guard him out there, like, might as well take him. But do I want him like starting over Jalen Duren? It's like, not really. Cause I think that's too hard a push in the direction of like, we're trying to win right now. I think you really need to spend this season figuring out what you have with Jaden Ivey and figuring out what you have with Jalen Duren, because you have to pay those guys real soon.
So I want to go back to the top where Omari asked you for your big picture thoughts. Are you quote unquote happy with the path that Trajan took in terms of just kind of like, forget the process of how they got here? You brought in floor spacers that over the last 5 years have played a ton of games and a ton of minutes, and especially offensively, that should make things better. Are you okay with kind of the role player path that they took? Or is there part of you that looks at, like, I don't think that the Pistons couldn't have outbid the Knicks for Mikal Bridges. I mean, I guess maybe the young guy, I don't know. Like, they probably couldn't have. But are you happy that they didn't get involved in the Mikal Bridges, the DeJounte Murray? They haven't gone after Brandon Ingram. Like, all of these names, realistic or not, are you okay with what they did as opposed to something along those lines?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Okay. There have been periods where, like, right now, I think Brandon Ingram's actually kind of undervalued. But I think the firsthand experience Trajan has with Brandon Ingram and like the lack of interest is like probably kind of tells you something. Even if I think Ingram is a really good player, between the Pistons needing to develop their young guys on the wing, between this draft class looking really good and you not needing to win like 35 games, and Brandon Ingram helps you do that. It makes a lot of sense, like why they didn't go in that direction. I think like I definitely could have talked myself into it, but I didn't think it was completely necessary. The other guy that kind of enters that conversation for me is Levine. And that's again where I think Levine is undervalued from an asset perspective, and maybe even a little bit better than Ingram because like he's locked in for like 2 or 3 more years. It's just the numbers really, really big.
But I think there's an argument that it would end up being shorter though, right? Like based off what Brandon wants.
Yeah,
I mean,
if you gave Ingram another 4-year deal like after this season, then longer.
Yeah. So yeah.
No, but Levine would be a really good fit offensively for this team as a guy like next to Cade. I think like that makes a lot of sense offensively, but you're sacrificing like a little bit of defense, and also that probably cost you like one of Ivy or Duren in the trade. And I understand like not wanting to pull the plug on that experiment like quite just yet. So yeah, I'm fine with like not going star hunting this offseason. This really wasn't the offseason to do it. I'm looking at VJ Edgecombe and AJ Bailey, and like we're not getting Cooper Flagg. Like I've already just like accepted that like we're eternally cursed and that's not happening.
The reverse jinx already underway. There we go.
You got to start early. But like there's talent. There's a lot of talent in this year's class, and so like I understand the desire to not like be like full speed ahead. Like we're gonna try and win 40 games. It's just like no. Like let's still see what we have in these guys and prepare to build.
And you can do the Jazz if all else fails, right? Like if they're better than maybe even what the three of us expect, you pull the plug at the deadline and do what you said. Like, all right, Ron, take over, my guy. Let's see what you got for the last 20 games of the year. And you know what? Then if it pops off, then you don't need Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe because you got Ron Holland and Cade Cunningham. And, if you win that many games that you're out of the sweepstakes for the top 5 guys, which right now most people have a top 5, then your young guys were probably much improved and you feel like you're in a pretty good place. So sorry, Omari. I kind of.
No, I was going to say, let's talk about the empty roster spot, which is like the last remaining piece of intrigue, like for this offseason. Like, do you have any preference to what they do with it? Do you see, we've talked a lot about obviously Cade and Ivy being staggered, but if one of those guys gets hurt, I mean, that essentially leaves you with one point guard. Like, do you see a need to fill that with maybe a Markelle Fultz or somebody, or do you value the flexibility, just given that clearly a couple more teams at least are going to make moves before the deadline and try to get back into the contention conversation?
So I would fill that spot, but I wouldn't fill it with a point guard. I feel like if one of Cade or Jaden goes down, then you start like tinkering with like, I know I said Marcus Sasser like wasn't a point guard, but you start tinkering with like Sasser plus like Asar on ball reps, or like Sasser plus like Ron on ball reps, and like we get that experiment that we talked about at the top of the pod started a little bit quicker. I really think they need to find like a defensive center, like maybe like not even somebody better than Taj Gibson, than as a player, somebody who can actually play. But like I would be calling Portland and being like, what do you want for Rob Williams, right? Like you can't hold 3 centers. Like you're not going to use this guy. Like what do you want for him?
Hey,
right?
The doo-wop Reith disrespect, man. I would take both of those dudes. I'd take Robert Williams for the defense and doo-wop for the floor spacing. But sorry, go ahead.
No, but Portland can't play all those guys.
Correct.
So it's like, which one don't you want? Like let's talk. There was one more like backup center that I was like, that guy's always been potentially.
Well, Orlando is hoarding all of them as well. They brought all of those dudes back.
So my conspiracy theory is that so like Lauri Markkanen, my conspiracy theory is like Lauri Markkanen is like holding up like a lot of this stuff, and so we're waiting for I think it's August 6th is like you can extend him, and like that's the last day he can be traded. So like they figure that whole thing out, and then New Orleans is going to grab one of the Orlando centers, and like that's because New Orleans desperately needs a center, and so like they'll get that figured out. But yeah, you call up Orlando and be like, hey, like you brought back, you don't want to break up the Wagners, like Goga's at a good price. It's like what do you want for a Goga? Or even like Wendell Carter Jr. They didn't lean as heavily on Carter Jr. as much as I thought they would. It's like maybe that's a guy that the Pistons could be interested in. But a center who I feel comfortable with defensively, like in drop coverage, who's like not 6'9", right? Yeah. Who's taller than that. Yeah. It's like that's I think still the lone remaining need for this team. And that's how I would use the open roster spot, Omari.
Yeah. As far as the rotation, I mean, obviously at that point you'd have 4 guys and you still kind of have this mismatch of but that gives you insurance in the event that Reed and or Duran don't really pan out. But at that point, are you just cool with not seeing Paul Reed at
Duran's
all?
had ankle injuries, right?
Yeah.
Like Stu's missed a couple games because he fought LeBron and missed a couple games like here and there. So like having a fourth big and especially at like a low price is like not the end.
Laz, I didn't realize this till I think it was our last episode. Stu, the last 2 years, has played 50 and 46 games respectively. Like sneakily hasn't played as many games over the last 2 as what I would have guessed after 68 and 71 his first 2 seasons. So, I mean, it is kind of interesting with that, with the center position and maybe being some more minutes and games to go around than what I would have thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to do a little bit of Olympics before we let you go. Omari, I know did you guys watch the game today? I assume we all watched the game today. Again, if you've tuned in live right now, the chat's disabled. My bad. I'm sorry. It'll be back next week, but thank you guys for staying locked in, even without the chat. So thank you guys so much. Let's do a little bit of Olympics. Laz, thoughts, what do you think about exhibition games and today?
So I watched the highlights of the exhibition games and all of today's game. My first thought was Jason Tatum 0 minutes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder what necessitated that.
It's very interesting that Jaylen Brown's not on the team. Tatum is on the bench. Drew Holiday starts and Derek White gets to play multiple minutes off the bench as well. And it's some
4D chess going on. They're thinking,
it's very like Kerr and everybody else. How can we drive the wedge between these guys? Because that's our only hope of beating the Celtics is pissing them all off and not liking each other.
So like Tatum was also, I think like in the exhibitions, he was playing the Durant minutes and like very clearly Durant was real good today. And so like that you understand like why they didn't go in that direction. But like even as the game was ending and it's like very much out of reach for Serbia, like to get no run for Tatum and Halliburton was interesting, I'll say.
So I thought they were going to move KD into the starting lineup whenever he got back. I still wonder if they don't, and you push Booker into the second unit, and then you kind of figure it out from there, like who plays and who doesn't. But here's one thing with Olympic play, they can't take their foot off the glass because point differential determines their overall seed in the bracket play. Yeah. And so you want to get that number 1 overall seed. So like that Steph Curry 3 at the end of the game wasn't just like, whatever. It wasn't meaningless depending on how much Canada or whoever comes out of the other pools, how much they win their games by. So
let's become first take real quick.
Oh my gosh.
It's the future of American basketball cooked. LeBron James, 39 years old. Kevin Durant, 35 years old.
Where are you reading
74 years old. They were the 2 best players. Steph Curry is 36. We don't see Tatum, no Halliburton. Anthony Edwards had a couple nice moves. But the old guys are dominating this team. What happens in 2028? Is this it?
So
no, because most of the time it's like international now. Like Americans are losing the long-term battle.
Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards,
Booker's young, like
Booker, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, Cooper Flagg,
Wemby,
Paulo.
The other teams have all the big dogs, man. Like the biggest dogs.
All the big dogs.
The biggest dogs are on the other
Evan
team.
Mobley should be on this team. Evan Mobley, you're gonna need that guy in 8 years or 4 years. You should have him around in the system. That's him and Chet are gonna be your attempt to answer the Wembanyama tsunami that's coming. So I would have tried to figure that out. AD will be too old and Bam's too small. But
Brandon Miller, we didn't even mention Brandon Miller, Tyrese Maxey.
Omar, what do you think of these AD Bam lineups? Like that's been the one thing that's kind of stood out to me is that's really funky and also not something I really expected from Steve Kerr, but it's worked. It worked today because they played those lineups when Jokic wasn't on the floor, and it's anything would work against Serbia when Jokic wasn't on the floor. Yeah. But what do you think of those 2 big lineups?
I was going to say, if you could just beat a team up, then by all means go for it. I'd love to see him try it against France. I don't think he could do it against every team, but against Serbia, especially when nothing was going, you're just let's just see what works outside of, KD going 8 for 8 in the first half. like the slow starts have been funny to see because it's like this team clearly like is probably the best team there still, but you see that gap closing. That's why I posed the American question and became first take for a minute because I just don't know. Don't know.
I mean, the gap is obviously closing, right? They played Serbia today, who had how many NBA? I mean, they had Jokic, they had Bogdanovic, they had Misic. And I know there's another one.
They had Jovic too.
Yeah,
right?
and Nikola Jovic. And so at one point they have 4 NBA dudes on the floor playing against, and I realize it's not the same level, but Canada, I think, has 10. I mean, it's just once the problem with the other teams is
Canada
they're not balanced.
Lost yesterday, though. Like that was a very funny like end of game situation,
right? But it's like France doesn't have the guards right now. Nolan Traore may have something to say about that over the next 4 years from now. And Canada doesn't really have the bigs, right? Canada's playing like Dwight Powell, KO, as their bigs. And so that's where America kind of has the advantage here. Wes, make sure to remind me that I did not mention Cade Cunningham in this conversation. So yes, Cade Cunningham, and to give Scotty Barnes, Paolo Banchero, all of those guys as well. So, but no, I mean, obviously the other countries are catching up. It's just different than what it used to be. I mean, look at first team All NBA this year was Giannis, Luka, Shea, Jokic, 4 of the 5. And Joel, I know he's playing for Team USA, but Joel wasn't allowed to be on first team. So what do you brought up?
Joel's selling. Joel.
No, I was just gonna say, so you brought up the 2 bigs off the bench. What are your thoughts about my theory is Joel's going to start because there's a reason Joel's on this team. And I figure like, there you go.
So I can say that because I'm not plugged in and like I don't actually like know things, but like
I'm not plugged in either.
That the extraction for like I'm not gonna play for France and like ruin everyone's day is like I have to start. It's like okay, sure, but like he's been really ineffective, and I wonder if he's still like recovering from injury because like he did kind of break down a little bit at the end of the playoffs. The playoffs are not. Like they're like what like at this point 3 months in the rearview mirror, and like you still have to train and everything. They've been in Vegas. It's like I wonder if he's not fully healthy, and that's interesting because Philadelphia did a whole bunch of stuff this offseason with the big caveat that like he was going to be ready when they were actually going to start like trying to win in the playoffs, and if he's hurt now, it's like it's kind of tough. But yeah, just it's going to be interesting to see if it gets to like really like we have to win time and they say that like we don't need Embiid or like we feel more comfortable without Embiid on the floor, like again as another matter of politics, like I wonder how that goes down.
Wes brings up a good point. The US versus the world would be the battle, right? Like it's not necessarily, I mean, and listen, they may not win the gold. Like I think there's a chance that they lose. I mean, a team gets hot, whatever. These other teams are good enough, but USA, even if you just put France and Canada together, that would be an insane roster. So it's a great point by Wes. Any other thoughts, Wes, Omari or Laz, Olympics or Laz, thoughts on the offseason in general? You mentioned like what the Sixers have done this offseason and, needing Joel healthy and all of that. Any surprise from the offseason? Any big moves? Hot takes right now as Omari wants us to go first take all of a sudden on the Pistons Pulse here at the end of July. Any thoughts from either of you on the offseason or the Olympics?
Omari, what you got?
Nah, I don't have any deep Olympic thoughts. I'm just here for the hoops at this point. I just want to turn my brain off. And
okay, well, what else do you watch from the Olympics? Do you watch any?
Man, I was watching what is it? Canoe slalom today or something? Like amazing. Like I was like, that might be my favorite Olympic sport is canoe slalom. I also like the skateboarding. Like I was like,
we're not
I
the
bit
same.
the bullet. I bit the bullet and got Peacock today. I was just like, it's $8. Maybe I have it for the next month. Just nothing else here. I want, and they have the
Omari, but like
whatever it's called.
Do you make the calendar reminder to cancel it in 30 days?
I do.
Okay,
I'm a notorious like very the end of the free trial.
Peacock isn't going to get free money from Omari.
No more money from me. You get the $8 and I'm out.
He's out. I love I watched the rugby sevens yesterday. That was awesome. That was really cool. Laz, what are you gymnastics, bicycling? What are you into?
Before the basketball, they have water polo, and like we got our butt kicked by Italy, but like that's always like I can't fathom like just being in the pool that long and like not drowning.
The stamina, man.
Yeah.
And then like on top of that, like you're trying to make like athletic change of direction moves. You're trying to like think about like ball movement and ball placement. The water, like someone like makes a wave and your like pass like doesn't go where you like thought it would. It's like that is so wild a sport to me. So like I'm eternally impressed by those guys.
Wes says gymnastics and handball.
Love gymnastics.
Gymnastics is great. I appreciate they're starting to do the packages too, where they're like, okay, like this is what makes a good gymnastics score. Because I'm just like she did a whole bunch of flips.
Yeah,
awesome.
Like, I'm like these are all tons to me. Like I don't know the difference. You know,
I've watched so many gymnastics routines where like that's definitely a 10. It's like that never happens, you idiot.
Yeah.
Why are you even thinking it? Are we all in on track and field though? I mean,
oh
yeah.
Okay,
did you watch Sprint on Netflix?
Yes, it was amazing. Laz, I loved it so much. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I loved it.
Omari, you got to watch. It's really,
watch it.
really. You need to watch it before I think they start on Friday. So you have like 4 days. This is Sprint right now is only building up to the World Championships last year, and then I think they're recording them. I think there's going to be one that comes out for the Olympics also, right, Laz?
Yeah, like I think this like Sprint is recording now, and like Simone Biles has a docuseries.
Oh yeah.
Also kind of being recorded right now for Netflix. So I think those are both like going to come out. We're going to see episodes of that like come out like during the Olympics, like as those things progress.
It's really good. It really kind of dives into some of the dynamics and the different clubs that people, and it goes to Jamaica, to Great Britain, Italy, because the guy from Italy was the 100 champ. Yeah. So
that was really cool.
Do you have Netflix, Amari, or do you need to steal ours?
No, I have Netflix. I have Netflix. I don't need to steal it.
Can I say that publicly? Or
you got Peacock money?
Oh
yeah, I have Peacock. Yeah. I got. Hey, if I have Peacock, I have Netflix. Like there's like a streaming hierarchy, right?
I mean,
right.
you're
There's
spending
like
$10 a month on those flashing lights behind your TV back there. Like you got plenty of money.
Yeah. Hey.
What is that?
It's just a little pizzazz, you know. It just adds a little spice to the room.
Okay, it just gives the room a little vibe. I got you.
Yeah, you know, it just adds a little something.
Okay,
that's all it is. Yeah, it just adds a little spice.
So last thing, where's your?
We'd go off the rails. Here we are.
Where's you guys like random patriotism level go like during the Olympics? Like, are you like we bust out like the American flag like T-shirts, bust out like the porcelain eagles and everything? Yeah. Or are you just like, oh, like this is cool? Like,
I'm Team USA. Like I want them to win everything, but I'm not like jumping up and down going. Other basketball, I feel like I have a little bit of like skin in the game for whatever reason. But I don't go too crazy.
Seeing everything LeBron did from the opening ceremony through the exhibition games and all that, like it's the closest I ever get to just feeling like a God bless America, like in my heart. Like you watch that, it's just like, man, like
also
like, we're the USA, like we're the USA, you know, like you start thinking
there's
USA,
a level of
USA.
arrogance you can have during the Olympics, right? As an American that every other country hates. Is Snoop Dogg like the non-athletic face of the Olympics this year also? Like whenever
he's the face of everything.
Oh man, like they were showing him during the swimming. He's sitting next to the dude's wife. He carried the torch. I didn't watch a whole lot of this ceremony to be honest with you, but yeah, Snoop Dogg's in there with all of that. So I think it's interesting too. Like we had Dwayne Wade on the call today, like just the different announcers and broadcasters they get that we don't always get from other sports. So man, this is why I love having you on, Laz. These are the first 60 minutes was awesome. This last 10 minutes was a blast. I enjoy it so much. So I know we all got other stuff to do, so we'll let him go. Laz, appreciate you so much. Plug what you got going on, man. Let everybody know. Make sure they're following you on Twitter and getting all of your thoughts and takes still.
No, Bryce and Omari, thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love chopping it up with you guys. I'm moving to Michigan in the not too distant future. And so I'll be like really happy to do like I'll show up on the live show in like February.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But of course, people can follow me on Twitter at LazChance. That's at LazChance. And I still do like a little bit of like consult work for Detroit Bad Boys. And I still love everyone over at Detroit Bad Boys. And so I highly encourage people to check out DetroitBadBoys.com for like more of your like analysis and like fan perspective of what's going on day to day with the Detroit Pistons.
And on top of that, make sure you're subscribed to the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel where our guy Wes and Blake are doing the weekly lives and podcasts. Like
Blake has been so invaluable as I try to like catch up with the 2025 class. Because like I don't watch any high school tape. I know nothing about any of these guys coming in until they start playing college basketball. So I get like you, Bryce, and Blake, guys like you guys grinding like EYBL tape for me. Like perfect. Thank you. Because I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I get it. So yeah, Detroit Bad Boys still doing huge things as always. They've been a mainstay. You guys know that. And Laz is kind of the godfather of that. Again, I owe Laz a lot. Him and Sean Corp I wouldn't be anywhere without those two guys and giving me a start at DBB. As much as I've had good people like Omari and Wes, those guys were there from the start also. So appreciate you guys. Thank you again, Laz. Omari, take it away, my guy.
As always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes as always. And we will be back next week.